Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the practice for your course literary texts 1. The code is 313. I hope you have enjoyed reading the text that we have studied together, and today we are going to concentrate on the kind of questions that you get for your exams. Let me remind you first of what we have been studying. In this course we have studied 2 literary genres, poetry and fiction. We did not study the 3rd genre that we spoke about, which is drama, but we only studied poetry and fiction. Hopefully in your next course in literary text you will be studying drama. In poetry, we studied 2 sonnets, and a sonnet, let me remind you, is a subgenre of poetry, because poetry is a very large genre. You have epic poetry, you have lyrical poetry, you have elegies, you have so many kinds of poetry, and a sonnet is one of the most well-known, especially in the English language, form, and it's quite an old form. We did 2 sonnets, and in English language we have 2 kinds of sonnets, the Italian and the English. As an example of the Italian or the Petrarchan sonnet, we did Edna St. Vincent Millay's Time Does Not Bring Relief. And then we did one of Shakespeare's sonnet, one of the most well-known, Sonnet 18. In fiction, we have studied only a short story, not a novel. Fiction encompasses both novels and short stories, and we have studied a short story by James Joyce called Evelyn, which is part of his short story collection, Dubliners. In this practice, we will discuss the questions and answers on these 3 texts. I will be going over the different kinds of questions that could be seen on an exam paper. Your exam paper is usually divided into 2 parts. Part 1 is the poetry and part 2 is the short story. Part 1 will have questions relating to the structure of the poem, which is the sonnet we've done, questions on imagery. Remember the sensory images and the figures of speech, metaphors, similes, and personifications. And also paraphrase questions. Paraphrase means you you rewrite the lines of poetry in your own words, explaining them. So, to start with the questions on structure, let me remind you of the structure of a sonnet. We said that a sonnet is divided into 2. A sonnet is, we have 2 kinds of sonnets, the Italian and the English sonnet, and they are divided differently. So an Italian sonnet is divided into an octave and a sestet. An octave and a sestet. The octave is 8 lines, and a sestet is 6 lines. So a Petrarchan sonnet is divided into 8 lines, a stanza of 8 lines. You should also know this word. A stanza means فقرة. فقرة جوه الشعر، مش فقرة like a paragraph. So a stanza of 8 lines and a stanza of 6 lines. This is how the Italian sonnet is divided. Now, what do we mean by divided? We mean that these 8 lines usually rhyme together, so the 8 lines of a Petrarchan sonnet would rhyme into the octave, would have the rhyme of A, B, B, A, and then again A, B, B, A, and then the sestet would rhyme into C, D, E, and C, D, E. Now, it's not only the rhyme scheme that differs between the octave and the sestet, but usually a sonnet would start an idea in the octave and sort of develop it or have a certain turn in the sestet. Different from that is the Shakespearean sonnet, which is divided into 4 quatrains. Quatrains means rubaiyat, and a couplet. And the quatrains are A, B, A, B, and then C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, and then G, G. And usually, again, this rhyme scheme reflects the division of the poem or the sonnet. So you have an idea that keeps recurring in the 3 quatrains for rubaiyat al-thalath. You have the same idea or very similar idea, and then you have this final couplet, which is usually very strong, either summarizing the whole sonnet or giving some sort of turn. So unlike a Petrarchan sonnet, the turn does not come in this line, but usually comes here. So, having said that, let's now try to understand and answer this question. Let me first tell you what is expected of you in writing these questions. Questions on poetry, you are expected to write 4 to 5 lines. It's not a paragraph. You're not answering in a paragraph form. We're not speaking about 10 to 15 lines like the paragraph you'll be asked to write. In these questions, you are answering the question in 4-5 sentences, maybe less if the question is shorter. So let's try and answer this first question on the structure. Although Sonnet 18 is a Shakespearean sonnet, yet it takes from the Italian sonnet its structure. Explain. Okay, we have Sonnet 18. Let's have a look at the sonnet. And this is in its rhyme scheme. It is definitely an English or Shakespearean sonnet, rhyming A-B, A-B, etc., with a final couplet. But then there is something of the structure of the Italian sonnet. What is this? It's the fact, what is the structure of an Italian sonnet? We're not speaking about the rhyme scheme, then we are speaking about the change from the octave to the sestet. And let's see if after 8 lines something different happens in the sonnet. The poet starts with, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate." The comparison continues until the 8th line starts with, "But thy eternal summer shall not fade." So in this line, we actually have some sort of a turn. We are not recurring the same, not repeating the same comparison, we are, or Shakespeare is introducing a different idea or a term, saying that the summer is different. The summer of the beloved is different. Nor lose possession of that fair that thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade. So here he is introducing this new idea that summer of the beloved is different. And you have the first two quatrains that make up the octave, and then the next quite different from each other. So if we go back to the question, although Sonnet 18 is a Shakespearean sonnet, yet it takes the form of an Italian sonnet in its structure. We can explain this saying that Sonnet 18 is a Shakespearean sonnet in the division of its rhyme scheme. It is rhymed according to the three quatrains and a couplet. The couplet has the function of giving a bit of a surprise by saying that it is the poetry of the poet that is great rather than the beloved, and but at the same time this turn starts not in the couplet but in the ninth line or after the octave. So the turn starts with "But thy eternal summer shall not thy eternal summer shall not fade." Okay. If we think of the rest of the issues of structure in the two sonnets, Shakespeare's sonnet is divided, as we said, into the rhyme scheme of three quatrains and a couplet. The couplet here does not, if we think of the function of the couplet usually either concludes or gives a surprise. So the two functions of the couplet is conclusion or surprise or a turn. So what kind of couplet do we have in Shakespeare's sonnet? Let's go back to the sonnet and try to see. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee. Throughout the sonnet, Shakespeare has been saying to his beloved, you are more beautiful than the summer. I am not comparing you to the summer because you are much better than the summer. You are more lovely, you are more temperate, you don't have all the disadvantages of summer. So he seems throughout the three quatrains to be praising his beloved. In this last couplet, we don't have a conclusion like summarizing this idea. We don't have Shakespeare saying, my beloved is much more beautiful than the summer because her beauty is endless. He actually is saying that my beloved's beauty is endless because it is recorded in my poetry. So in the last two lines, we realize that actually Shakespeare is speaking more about his poetry than about his beloved. So he is speaking about the power of his poetry, the immortality of his poetry. Immortality means khulud, the immortality of his poetry. So if we're speaking about the function of the couplet in Shakespeare's Sonnet 18 actually introduces a kind of surprise. After having Shakespeare speak about the beloved for 3 quatrains, we have him now speaking about the power of his poetry and the power of words to immortalize. So this is the function of the couplet, if we're speaking about the couplet. You can also notice that the division into quatrains, punctuation is used to divide the sonnet into quatrains. So for example, you'll never find the first line of a quatrain with a comma. It is either a colon or a semicolon. There has to be some sort of stop at the end of each 4 lines. So you have the first quatrains ending in, and Summer's Lease has all too short a date, and then a colon. The next one, by chance or nature's changing course, untrimmed, a semicolon. If you go to the previous line, and every fair from fair sometimes declines, comma. You'll never find a comma, for example, at the end of any of the 3 quatrains. It has to be a colon, a semicolon, or a full stop, but not a comma. No sentence is continued from the last line of a quatrain to the following one. If we speak about the structure of the Italian sonnet, we said that the Italian sonnet is divided into an octave and a sestet. And when we look at an Italian sonnet, again, we don't just look at the rhyme scheme, but we also have to think of the idea. What is started in the octave and how does it develop in the sestet? So here, time does not bring relief, you all have lied, who told me time would ease me of my pain. I miss him in the weeping of the rain, I want him at the shrinking of the tide. The old snows melt from every mountain side, and last year's leaves are smoke in every lane, but last year's bitter loving must remain, heaped on my heart, and my old thoughts abide. Here stops the octave, and then we start the sestet. There are 100 places where I fear to go, so with his memory they brim. And there is a development between the octave and the sestet that I hope you have realized while reading the sonnet. The octave speaks mainly about time, and with the start of the sestet we have developed into another point, which is place. So what the sonnet is actually saying is that love is neither in the place or in the time, it is in the heart. So time changes, but love stays, places change, and love stays. So if we're speaking about how the idea is developed in Millet's sonnet, time does not bring relief, you have an octave speaking about time, and you have the sestet speaking about a different point, which is place, and of course there's something common between them, or something that put them together, which is the fact that these are the changing things, but love is the fixed thing, or the invariable, if you like, the thing that does not change. So these are the issues of structure in the sonnets. we can then move to another kind of question, our second kind of question, which is the imagery. Let me remind you that we usually speak about imagery. We usually divide imagery into sensory images and figures of speech or comparisons, of which we have studied this term, the simile, the metaphor, and the personification. Now, how can we be examined on these? You're not going to be asked to define what is a metaphor or what is a simile, but you will have lines with an image in which you can then explain. So a question will be like this one: nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. These are two lines I hope you recognize from Shakespeare's sonnet, and the question will ask you to identify the image in the above lines and explain its significance. So, what is the image here, and what is its significance? Why is it used? Nor shall death brag, thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. This means the image here is a personification of death. Death is personified as a human being who is going to be very proud to take this lovely lady into his shade, into his house. So the identification part is the personification of death. Now, why is this image important? This image is important because it shows how the poet is going to beat death. The poet imagines death as a person, as a rival يعني خصم. Okay, if he imagines death as a rival whom he's going to beat. So death is not going to be proud by taking you from me, but I will always keep you. How is he always going to keep her? He's going to keep her by recording her beauty in his poetry. So what's the significance of the image? The significance of the image is that it shows how the poet will be able to beat death and immortalize his beloved through his words and his poems. So the answer to this question will not be, as I told you, more than 3 to 4 sentences. You identify the image and you explain it. Death is personified, and this is the identification. It's a personification. Death is compared to a person who would be proud to take a lovely lady to his house, and its significance. Why is it important? It is important because it shows that the poet will be able to beat that person and will be able to immortalize his beloved. Let's try one more time. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease have all too short a date. Identify the image in the above lines and explain its significance. Here actually we have, in these 2 lines, we have 2 images. We have a sensory image, which is the description of how the winds are shaking the flowers, the small flowers, the buds, al-bara'im, in summer. So this is a sensory image actually a visual image or an image of movement. Both are right, because you can see it and you can also feel the movement of the wind. So rough winds do shake the darling buds of May is a sensory image of sight, or a visual image, or an image of movement. You can say any of these. And why is it significant? It is significant because it shows the disadvantages of summer. Here, the poet is trying to show us the disadvantages of summer, and so he gives us this image to make us see that summer is not all beautiful days. So that's one image. The other image is summer's leaves have all too short a date. And the image here is a figure of speech. It is a metaphor comparing summer to a lodger who rents a place, who rents a house. So summer is compared to a lodger, sakin, who rents a house and rents it for a very short period of time. It has all too short a date. Summer does not stay for a long. So summer is compared to a lodger who stays for a short period. And what's the significance? It's the same significance of the above, the previous line, which is to show the disadvantages of summer. So maybe you can have this question saying identify the images in the above line, and in this case you will have to identify both images, or if it says identify the image, then you just choose one. Let's do one last question and then move on to different types of questions. I miss him in the weeping of the rain, I want him at the shrinking of the tide, the old snows melt from every mountain side, and last year's leaves are smoke in every lane. Now this, as you will recognize, I hope, is part of Millet's sonnet, and the question asks you to explain the images in these lines and the significance. Now, again, we have to decide, are these sensory images or figures of speech, comparisons, and what is the significance? Why are they used? Significance means أهمية أو معنى أو قيمة. Why are they used in this? Why is the poet using these images? So, first we have to decide. We don't have any figures of speech actually here. It's all descriptions of the weather, except for the first one, the weeping of the rain. Rain is, or the sky is compared to a person who is crying. So there is a personification of the sky. And the shrinking of the tide is a visual image or an image of movement. Tide is going back. The melting of the snows, again a visual image. You can see the snows melting, and the leaves are smoke in every lane is also another visual image. And perhaps if smoke can bring this idea of the smell of smoke, so it could be an olfactory image. So in answering this question, you will have to list all these images. Now, when you come to the significance, why are these images important? Why is she telling us about the rain, the tide, the snow, and the burning leaves? She is using all these images in this poem to show the movement of time or the passage of time. So the significance of all these images is to show that time is passing. There is rain, we move from winter to summer, where the snows start melting, and then to autumn, where the leaves fall and they start getting burning. So she is actually giving us images that show the passage of time or the different seasons. And so this is the answer. You first explain the images. There are images of sight, images of smell, and there is one personification in the first line. And then why are they used? They are used to show the passage of time. Okay, then we move to part 2, the short story. We have, on the short story, you will get two kinds of questions. First, comprehension questions, where again you are only asked to answer in 3 to 4 sentences, maybe less. Answer the question to make sure that you have read and understood the story. We will get questions like, what changes does Evelyn notice about her neighborhood? This comes from the opening paragraph of the story. You can speak about the new houses, the people who have left, and again, 3 to 4 lines. What do you think Evelyn has written in the 2 letters she wrote to her father and brother? This is actually guessworks, because we are not told what is in the envelope. We are only told that the envelope lie on her lap. So here you can only guess, but if you've read the story, you would know what she would like to tell to the father and to the brother. Perhaps she'll apologize, perhaps she will tell them to take care of the young children, her brothers and sisters, and so on. Do you think Evelyn loved Frank? Again, this is a question of opinion, but when you're answering it, you'll have to show that you know the story. So say that yes, she loved him because she enjoyed going to the theater with him. She wanted she enjoyed his kind-heartedness and his jokes. Or say, no, she did not love him, she only wanted to escape with anyone. As long as you bring evidence from the story, your answer is right. Describe Evelyn's home, so you should be able to describe the place. Describe Evelyn's work. She worked at a shop and she was not very happy. And her boss was a mean person who always criticized her. So these 3 sentences would just answer the question. How did Evelyn feel about the memory of her mother? She had 2 contradictory feelings. Feeling that she has promised her to take care of the children and of the house, so she felt guilty if she does not do this, and also she had feelings that she does not want to be like the mother, miserable, submissive, and ending in sickness and craziness. How did Evelyn feel when she was about to board the ship with Frank? She felt totally lost, unable to take a decision. She felt paralyzed, and she felt a lot of danger. What kind of problems did Evelyn have with her father? You can speak here about Evelyn fearing the violence of her father, Evelyn not happy with the way the father did not give her enough money in order to pay for the food that she has to buy in the house. And also you can speak about the fact that she wanted to get married and he did not and forbid her to meet Frank. Now we come to the last question, which is paragraph writing. This is part 2 of the short story. You will be required to write a paragraph on one of the elements of fiction in relation to the story you have studied, in relation to Evelyn. And when I'm speaking about a paragraph, I mean you have to write a paragraph that has all the elements of a good paragraph as you have studied in all your writing courses. So it has to be indented. So first, it has to be indented. You have to start with a capital letter, and you have to write a topic sentence, a concluding sentence. You have to write, of course, in full sentences, full English sentences, starting with a capital letter, ending in a full stop. And your paragraph should have a topic sentence, a concluding sentence, and at least 3 supports. Okay. Now, what are you going to write a paragraph on? You're going to write about one of the elements of fiction that we have studied. How can we write a paragraph about the elements of fiction? Let's take them element by element and think. First, for example, the plot. How can we write about the plot? Perhaps you will be asked about the conflict. What is the conflict of Evelyn, for example? Or what is the conflict in the short story Evelyn? And in this case, you have to write your topic sentence and then think of 3 to 4 points you are going to speak about. Evelyn's conflict is whether to leave her home and marry Frank, or to stay in her unhappy life and repeat somehow the life of her mother. What are the supports? The supports we are going to use will have to come from the story. So Evelyn's conflict is not knowing whether to leave her home and escape with Frank or not. Now, in your supports, you can think of her promise to the mother and her feeling that she doesn't want to be like the mother. So this will be one point, that her conflict intensified when she thought of the mother, because she has promised her to keep the house together. However, she also does not want to repeat the life and the fate of the mother, and so she is not happy to stay. Then speak about perhaps the Frank himself. Her feelings to Frank are not making her resolve this conflict easily. She loves him and loves his ways and what he provides her, but on the other hand, she does not totally trust him, which is shown in the last scene of the story, when she feels that he's going to drown her. So this is how you explain the conflict of Evelyn. and perhaps at the end you can make your concluding sentence about how this conflict has finally ended. Usually in a paragraph about any element of fiction, what you should be writing is a sentence with a judgment from you. So, for example, I think Evelyn loved Frank very much, and then you add a sentence referring to the short story. You say, for example, this is shown in the fact that she wanted to live with him, that she said this, or that she did that. So you always say something and then illustrate it from the story. Other elements of plot that we can be asked about in writing is, for example, the resolution. How does the story end, and how do you read the ending of the story? So you can write a paragraph on that, how the ending of the story how do you understand the ending of the story? The fact that Evelyn, after all this preparation, decided not to go. So you can say something, for example, I think Evelyn did not want to go because she loved her family so much, and then you give your evidence for that. So this is the plot. You can be asked about the conflict, about the resolution, and so on. You can be asked about characters. So, for example, you'll be asked to write a paragraph about the father, Frank, Evelyn. And remember that we spoke about characters are either round or flat characters. So we have characters that have two sides or that develop. So if you have a character that changes in the story, then you say that this is a character that changes, and you explain its change. Let's think, for example, that we are writing a paragraph about the father. You write your topic sentence saying that the father is an important character in this story, and that he has two sides to his character, because we have this good and bad side, if you like. And then your support would be what good points you have about the father and what bad points. If we're speaking, usually if you're speaking about a character, the easiest way is to give it an adjective and then start illustrating it. So perhaps you can say the father is a selfish character, and then say why you are saying this. It is because he thinks that Evelyn, the father is a selfish character because he has refused to have Evelyn married because he wanted her to take care of the house. So if we're speaking about the father, you have something like selfish, and then you have to say that he also has another side to his character, which is the fact that he is a kind father. And here you can mention what Evelyn has said about the trip they had together when the mother was still alive, and how he wanted the kids to love, etc. You can also have another point about the violence of the father, and so you say the father is a violent person, and that he was violent with his sons, and that Evelyn was always afraid of him. So all you have to do is write this topic sentence and concluding sentence, and at least 3 supports from the story itself, illustrating the character of any of the main characters. You can also be asked to write about imagery, what kind of imagery the story uses, and because some stories don't use imagery at all, some stories use lots of descriptions, so maybe you will choose 2 or 3 images and speak about them in the story. What is very important that I have to insist on is this idea that you write a full English paragraph between 15 and 20 lines, correct sentences and correct format. And I wish you all the luck. Thank you very much.